A black woman is driving a government-issued vehicle. She's not speeding, she's not breaking any law. But when police pull her over and ask for her license, she hands them something that makes their faces go pale. She's the state attorney. And what happens next will leave you speechless. This isn't just a traffic stop. It's a moment that exposes something much deeper and far more dangerous. It began with flashing blue lights and a routine request, but what happened next shook the system to its core. On a humid Florida afternoon in June, traffic was steady, the sky clear, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But for one driver, cruising calmly in a state-issued black sedan, everything was about to take a sharp and unexpected turn. The vehicle wasn't speeding, it didn't swerve or break any laws, but that didn't stop two Orlando police officers from flipping on their sirens and signaling the driver to pull over. Dashcam footage captures what happens next. The car slows down, safely pulls over, and a uniformed officer walks up to the driver's side window. He looks slightly unsure, like he doesn't fully know why this car was stopped in the first place. Inside the vehicle sits a composed black woman in a neat blazer. She rolls down the window and greets the officer politely. Without hesitation, he makes the classic request, "License and registration, please." The woman complies, calmly, confidently. She hands over a small black wallet. The officer opens it, and that's when everything changes. Inside is a badge and an official ID that reads, Aramis Ayala, State Attorney, 9th Judicial Circuit. You can see the realization flash across the officer's face like a jolt of electricity. This wasn't some random citizen. This wasn't someone who didn't know their rights. This was the top prosecutor for the region, the state attorney. He stammers. His partner approaches the car, also trying to make sense of what's unfolding. Suddenly, the energy shifts. What started as a stop based on suspicion now becomes a mess of nervous justifications. One officer mumbles something about running the license plate and getting no return. The other claims the windows might have been too tinted. Ayala, poised, calm, completely in control, asks a simple question, "What was the tag run for?" Silence. Then a vague answer about random checks and routine procedures. But Ayala wasn't having it. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She simply stared, letting the moment stretch uncomfortably long, forcing the officers to sit with their own uncertainty. She knew her rights. She knew the law. She was the law. And in that moment, those two officers had to reckon with the fact that they had just pulled over the highest-ranking black legal official in the area, for absolutely no valid reason. The most jaw-dropping part? This entire situation could have gone very differently. Had she been anyone else, any ordinary black woman driving a dark-tinted vehicle, this stop could have escalated. Questions could have turned into accusations. Calm could have turned into chaos. Headlines could have read something far worse. But Ayala's identity stopped the situation from spiraling. And that's the point. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a random check. It was a wake-up call. This moment, captured forever on police footage, exposed a truth too many people already knew. Black drivers, no matter their status or success, are not immune to profiling. When asked later about the incident, Ayala didn't express anger, though no one would have blamed her if she did. Instead, she used the moment to call for transparency, for training, and for honest conversations about who gets pulled over and why. Because the truth is chilling. If they didn't know she was the state attorney, what might they have done? This wasn't just a traffic stop, it was a mirror. One that showed us exactly how far we still have to go. Routine, that's what they called it. The officers said the stop was part of a routine check. But let's be honest. What exactly was routine about pulling over a government vehicle driven by the state attorney herself? Let's break down what really happened, and what it says about something much bigger. According to the officers, they decided to run the tag on Ayala's unmarked government car while they were sitting at a red light behind her. The results came back blank. No record, no registration. That triggered suspicion, they said. But here's the catch, it was a state-issued vehicle. These types of vehicles often aren't registered the same way personal cars are. Law enforcement should know that, especially seasoned officers working in a city like Orlando. If you've been on the job long enough, you've probably seen dozens of these cars. You know how they work. Still, they made a choice. They turned on the lights, pulled her over. And once they saw a black woman behind the wheel, they didn't assume she was someone important. They didn't assume she was a legal professional. They didn't even assume she worked for the government. No. Their reaction showed what they really assumed. And once she revealed her identity, everything changed. The officers got nervous. One started offering vague explanations. The other mentioned the car windows were pretty dark. Maybe that was the reason too, he said. But again, tinted windows are standard issue for government vehicles. That's not a crime. That's not probable cause. That's not a reason to pull someone over. It's called grasping at straws. At one point, you can almost feel the awkwardness leaking out of the body cam footage. The officers realize they've made a mistake, a big one, and now they're face to face with someone who not only knows the law, she enforces it. But here's what makes this moment so powerful. Aramis Ayala didn't panic. She didn't lash out. She didn't threaten them with lawsuits or revenge. Instead, she asked questions they weren't ready to answer. What exactly was the issue with my tag? And is this standard procedure? How often are these random checks happening? In her calm, deliberate tone, she made them confront the fact that they had just profiled someone not because of behavior, but because of how she looked and what they didn't expect her to be. Imagine if they'd never seen her ID. Imagine if she'd been nervous, if she'd reached for her purse too quickly, if she'd said the wrong thing, or just had a tone they didn't like. How fast could that moment have escalated? That's the terrifying reality many black drivers live with every day. That's what this stop exposed. And the thing is, it didn't happen in isolation. This wasn't some one-off case. Aramis Ayala's experience was part of a larger, disturbing pattern, black people being stopped, questioned, and treated with suspicion, while doing absolutely nothing wrong. Studies back it up. Numerous investigations have shown that black drivers are disproportionately stopped by police, often for vague reasons like window tint, license plate issues, or failure to signal. These stops rarely result in citations or arrests, but they often leave behind a lasting message: you don't belong here. But Ayala did belong. In fact, she had more legal power than the very people who pulled her over. And when they found out who she was, they couldn't end the encounter fast enough. No ticket, no warning, no further questioning, just a quick retreat, and probably a very awkward call to their supervisor later. This wasn't about bad cops versus good cops. This was about how bias creeps into everyday decisions that could easily turn deadly if the situation were just slightly different. And if this can happen to a state attorney, what about the rest of us? She wasn't just any black woman behind the wheel that day. She was a trailblazer, a history maker, and a force in Florida's justice system. Aramis Ayala didn't just climb the legal ladder. She kicked down doors that had been closed for centuries. Born in Michigan, raised in Saginaw, and later a student at the University of Michigan, Ayala always had her eyes set on justice. But her story isn't just about law school and courtroom victories. It's about grit, grace, and guts. Before becoming state attorney, she worked as a public defender, a prosecutor, and even taught law. She understood the legal system from every angle, and she saw its cracks from the inside. So when she ran for state attorney in Florida's 9th Judicial Circuit, which includes Orlando and Osceola County, she wasn't just running for office. She was running to change the way justice was delivered in her community. And in 2016, history was made. Aramis Ayala became the first black state attorney in Florida history. Just let that sink in. In a state with nearly 22 million people, where racial disparities in the justice system are well documented, no black person had ever held that position, until her. But she didn't stop there. The moment she took office, Ayala did something most politicians don't dare to do. She stood on principle. In 2017, she made national headlines when she announced that her office would not seek the death penalty in any case, not even high-profile ones. She called it what it was: broken, ineffective, and racially biased. This wasn't just bold. It was revolutionary. The backlash was immediate and fierce. The then governor of Florida, Rick Scott, retaliated by stripping her of over 24 murder cases, assigning them to other prosecutors. Critics accused her of abandoning victims. Others said she was overstepping her role, but Ayala held her ground. In press conferences and interviews, she didn't backpedal. She didn't water down her words. She explained her reasoning. The death penalty had zero proven impact on public safety, cost taxpayers millions, and was used disproportionately against people of color. Her stance turned her into a national figure. Civil rights groups applauded her. Legal experts debated her approach. And for once, the criminal justice system had a top official openly challenging its deepest flaws from the inside. But the pressure took a toll. By 2019, Ayala announced she would not seek re-election. She said she had made her mark and was ready to pass the torch. Still, the legacy she left behind was undeniable. And that's what makes the traffic stop so haunting. Here you had a woman who had reached one of the highest positions in law enforcement. She was a seasoned legal mind, a former prosecutor, and a national figure. And yet, none of that protected her from being stopped, for no valid reason, by two local officers who had no idea who she was. It proved a painful truth: no title, no education, no amount of success can shield you from bias. For millions of Black Americans, that's not a theory. It's a lived reality. And Ayala's experience made it crystal clear. She may have worn the badge of a state attorney, but the moment those officers saw her, they didn't see her power, they didn't see her credentials. They just saw a Black woman behind the wheel of a nice car. And that was enough. This wasn't just about one woman. This was about what it means to be Black and successful in a world that too often still sees your skin before your status. Ayala's story isn't just impressive, it's a mirror, and the reflection it gives us is one we can't afford to ignore. When the dashcam footage hit the internet, it didn't just go viral, it exploded. Within hours, millions had seen it, and by the next day, social media was lit up with one burning question: if this can happen to the state attorney, what chance does the rest of us have? People weren't just shocked, they were angry, emotional, and energized. Comment sections flooded with disbelief. News anchors debated it on live TV. TikTok creators broke it down frame by frame. Instagram stories reshared the clip with hashtags like #DrivingWhileBlack and #AramisAyala. The footage showed something that so many Black Americans already knew, but that others were finally being forced to witness in real time. Power doesn't always protect you from prejudice. Ayala wasn't dressed in a hoodie, she wasn't blasting music, she wasn't being disrespectful. She wasn't even in her personal car. She was driving a state-issued vehicle, minding her own business on the job, and still, flashing lights, questions, doubt, suspicion. It hit home for so many people who had lived through almost identical experiences, just without the badge, the platform, or the safety of a viral video. On Twitter, one user wrote, "I'm a lawyer. I've been pulled over 3 times this year for random checks. I look just like her. I drive a nice car too. This isn't rare, it's routine." Another added, "If she didn't say who she was, who knows what that stop would have become." That's the scariest part. The conversation quickly turned into something bigger than Aramis Ayala. It became a rallying cry, a clear, painful example of why people across the country continue to protest, to film, to speak out. Even celebrities weighed in. Ava DuVernay tweeted, "Aramis Ayala is a hero. Calm, brilliant, dignified. If even she can't drive home without being questioned, the system is broken." Others pointed out the irony. The officers who pulled her over worked for a system she literally helped lead. And still, not a single apology. No public explanation from the department. No discipline. Just a weak, generic statement calling it a routine interaction. But Ayala wasn't focused on punishment. She was focused on progress. In a public statement after the incident, she said, "I look forward to having an open dialogue with the sheriff's office about the interaction and how such encounters can be avoided in the future. Transparency is the key to accountability. No outrage, no threats. Just a graceful demand for change, and that's part of what made her reaction so powerful." While the world raged, Ayala remained composed, but unshaken. Her calm became its own kind of protest. She didn't need to yell. Her silence between sentences said enough. What the internet realized, what the country realized, is that this story wasn't about outrage. It was about evidence. Evidence that bias doesn't ask for your resume. That systemic racism isn't always loud or violent. It's often quiet, casual, and hidden behind a badge and a question: license and registration, please. Ayala's story became more than just a viral clip. It became a case study, shared in classrooms, featured in articles, cited in conversations about police reform and racial justice. Because in just 2.5 minutes of footage, the entire nation saw how easily suspicion falls on the wrong people, and how often those people look the same. And if Ayala hadn't handled it the way she did, who knows what headlines we might be reading now. This moment changed something, not just in Florida, not just for Aramis Ayala, but for every person who watched that video and thought, that could have been me. That has been me. And now, the world sees it too. At first glance, it was just a traffic stop, but by the end, it became something much, much bigger. What happened to Aramis Ayala on that Florida afternoon wasn't about traffic laws or tinted windows. It wasn't about missing license plate data or routine patrol procedures. It was about perception. It was about power. And it was about prejudice. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. It didn't matter who she was. She could have been the state attorney. She was the state attorney. But in those first few seconds, what the officers saw wasn't her badge, her title, or her track record. They saw a Black woman, alone, driving a nice car, and that was enough to raise suspicion. Now imagine if she wasn't the state attorney. No badge to flash, no name to drop, no cameras to back her up. What would that stop have looked like? How might it have ended? Because we've seen how quickly these encounters spiral. That's what made this story hit so hard for so many. It shattered the illusion that success can protect you. We tell young people all the time, stay in school, get educated, work hard, rise up the ladder, and the world will treat you differently. Our Miss Ayala did all that. She made history, she followed the rules, she didn't just play the game, she changed it. And still, she was pulled over without cause. That's what left people speechless. That's what made this more than just a viral clip. Because it exposed a truth we all need to face. Bias doesn't care about your resume. Racism doesn't care about your title. Prejudice doesn't ask for ID. And that's why this story matters. It matters because it wasn't just about Miss Ayala. It was about every black man, woman, and child who's ever been stopped, questioned, or feared for their life, for no reason at all. It matters because even though Ayala handled it with grace, professionalism, and dignity, she shouldn't have had to. No one should have to use their badge or title as a shield to survive an interaction with police. No one should feel their life depends on staying calm enough, polite enough, or non-threatening enough just to make it home safely. But that's the reality too many people live with, and this story made it undeniable. So what happened next? Well, there was no formal apology from the officers, no grand internal investigation, no sweeping policy change. But something did change. The world paid attention. People shared the clip not just because it was shocking, but because it was familiar, because it proved what so many have been saying for decades, because it forced uncomfortable conversations in homes, classrooms, and police departments across the country. And most importantly, it gave others the courage to speak up about their stories. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't dramatic or violent. Sometimes they're quiet, awkward, and only a few minutes long. But they reveal a system built on assumptions, and those assumptions can be deadly. Miss Ayala used her platform, her power, and her poise to do something extraordinary. She turned a moment of injustice into a teaching moment for the world. And that's why this wasn't just a traffic stop. It was a spotlight, a siren, a warning, a reminder that even now, in 2025, we still have work to do. Closing narration for video ending. If the state attorney isn't safe from profiling, who is? And if that doesn't leave you speechless, you're not listening closely enough. If this story shocked you, or if it reminded you of something you've seen or experienced, don't scroll away. Drop a comment and tell us how this moment made you feel. Share this video with someone who still thinks profiling doesn't happen. And if you believe in real stories that spark real change, hit that like button and subscribe. Because we're not done telling the truth.